Hello everyone, welcome to St. Olaves Homework Booklet number 3 video walkthrough.
This is comprehension section of St. Olaves, and we're starting off with the Palmer raids. And I always make a summary of the text. So if you read through, let's just zoom out a little bit so we can see. When you read through the Palmer raids, it's talking about how around 1919, so let's try and build context in our minds. This is around after First World War, I'm pretty sure. And it's basically talking about how there's a guy called Palmer who was an attorney general. Make sure you underline key pieces of information and how some anarchists tried to bomb several buildings in Washington, D.C. And why am I summarizing? Just so it's way easier for me to get a gauge on answering comprehension questions, because if you have no idea what's going on, it's going to be hard to answer the questions. But along this, the whole point is that Palmer carried out some investigations on leftist and anarchist men. Leftist means socialist, more communist, more anarchist. And it says here, anarchy is a belief in abolishing all governments. He got the help of Hoover, who was a young justice attorney, and them two together were sort of like a dynamic duo. They carried out the raids, however, the raids were badly received as they kind of just arrested everybody. They didn't actually have any evidence, or no, the people they arrested didn't actually do anything violent. They just had socialist or leftist opinions. And despite that, they did have two outcomes from these raids. They had the Constitution, so the American Constitution. It was upheld, and Hoover founded what we know as the FBI, which I'm sure everybody knows now, which is huge. So now that we've done a little summary, let's actually begin the questions. Based on the passage, why did Palmer's political career suffer as a result of the Palmer's raids? Now, let's go back to the passage where it talks about the raid itself and the consequence of it. So here it talks about the raids. The goal was to arrest the leftist organization members and deport them out of the United States. But there was a problem where the vast majority of men arrested had not broken any laws. So that was the raid. Now let's go find the consequence. And we see here that the public was outraged by what the press called the raids, and they refused to comply. So the lawyers refused to actually deport anyone, and judges didn't even work on the cases. So why did his political career suffer? Because the public and federal judges disagreed with the method used in the raids. That says that explicitly in the text. He wasn't supposed to take responsibility. No one said he needed to do that. He lost the support of the Justice Department. It doesn't talk about the Justice Department because it was, and so too were federal judges. It was not just the Justice Department, it's also federal judges. So B is a lot more broad. And then A, he was not part of the bombings. So B is the right answer. So what did the public think of the Palmer raids? Question 1 kind of helps you with this. It says here expressly that the public was outraged. Let's go ahead and highlight that. If the public is outraged, you can probably assume that they weren't happy. So they did not support, they didn't think they were necessary, and they did not praise them. In fact, it was C, where the public was outraged and critical of the Justice Department's actions during the raid. So question 3, what does the passage suggest about the government's views on anarchists? So we're talking about the government's views, and bear in mind Palmer was part of the government. They said he was an attorney general, or let's go back in a bit to see what he was. The government's views on anarchist and socialist revolutions. So let's highlight the key words of government supported, government indifferent, and now the rest of it carries on to the next page. Government concerned or encouraged. Now, just from the air of the text, the raids were to apprehend socialist organizations, but let's just go back and confirm. I would go for C at the moment. Let's go back to the text. So it literally says here, the government had become increasingly worried about anarchist or socialist revolution. Because of this, American officials had long been monitoring anarchists and other people who spoke out against the United States. So just for some more context, why anarchism and socialism is very, very different to the regime going on in the United States. They're a very capitalist country. So that's why they don't want people going against their political regime, which is why the government would be concerned. So if we revisit our answers, we can see that C, the government was concerned and had been monitoring anarchist and socialist activities. So based on the passage, why did the Justice Department create the Bureau of Investigation? Remember, Hoover was helping Palmer. We know it's not really to do about World War One, this passage, and it doesn't really mention Union of Russian Workers at all. So it's between A and B. Now we know that there is some mention of Italian anarchists. However, let's look more generally back to the text. So it does say here that the Palmer's Justice Department had kept tabs, and then he created a new department to investigate the bombings. But it's not just talking about Italian socialists, it's talking generally. It's not talking just about the Union of Russian Workers, that's too specific. And it's not talking about just the Italians. They're talking about generally the Bureau was made to investigate just generally anarchists and socialists. If you go too specific, then you're not including all of the text. So let's go back to our solutions. The role of the Bureau of Investigation is to monitor known anarchist and socialist organizations. So A is the answer.
2 sentences give us 2 reasons for the grandmother's hoard. She kept a safety net in case her fears came true. That makes it a needless worry. B. The narrator calls the habit belonging to another era. That shows it is out of date. D. Because both statements are printed, B and D are acceptable.
So we know from previous questions, for question 6, that the federal judges and the public, they were all outraged. So we can definitely cross out A, and we can definitely cross out C. So we're left with B and D. And B and D is also when we have to go back to the text to see what the difference was between how each group reacted. So let's go back to the text. So it says here that the lawyers refused to deport, and judges as a whole throughout the cases, the judges, they said, took away the citizens' rights. Well, in the judges' opinions, that the justice system is meant to protect Americans' rights, the Justice Department. However, the judges said that they had taken away the citizens' rights and therefore violated them. Therefore, question number 6, B is the right answer, as federal judges throughout the cases and argued that citizens' rights had been violated. This is the answer that is closest to what it says in the text. D is a little bit too vague. They said refuse to cooperate. However, B gives much more information. So question 7.
So what can be inferred about the outcome of the cases if the judges did not work with them and the lawyers did not work with them is that not much happened to them. The cases of the arrested individuals were dismissed due to lack of evidence. That is what we can infer, because people refused to work with the arrested individuals since there was barely any evidence about them actually planting the bombs. We know from the text that they were not deported because the lawyers refused to deport them. So B is the only answer that makes the most sense. For question 8, going back exactly to the text, we know that the public did have a reaction in the text. The one I'd most go for is Justice Department's reputation suffered due to criticism and loss of support. Why? Let's go back. So it says here that Palmer's political career was ruined, and the Justice Department itself lost both real and assumed powers. So because of the public's outrages, the Justice Department lost much of its power and authority. Therefore, we can say that C is the correct answer. Now, for 9, again, we know that all we know about Luigi Galliani and his followers, they are leftist / socialist / anarchists, and it tells you what anarchism is in the text. It tells you that anarchism is a belief in abolishing all governments. So because they're involved in bombings, I'd say it's not A, definitely not B. The one we know for a fact, because they are anarchists, is C. They promoted the idea of abolishing all governments and social structures. So next,
The final line says, "Finally, we said goodbye to the past." That feeling of drawing a line under things is best described as closure, which is option B.
So this is the beginning of the math section for factors. I'm starting with question number 11. Now, the key words here are 3 consecutive whole numbers that are multiplied together. The answer is 990. So what are these 3 numbers? We know that anytime a number ends with a 0, it has a 10 in it. So it's a sum number multiplied by another number multiplied, by another number. We definitely know that one of them is 10. Now, what's important is that they're consecutive. If we have 990, we divide that by 10. Let's try and figure out what these ones are. We know that this one is equal to 990. What's left? Divided by 10, we know that just 99 is left, and we know that 9 and 11 make 99. Therefore, our consecutive numbers are 9, 10, and 11. Let's put that here. 9, 10, and 11. Good. Question number 12. Now for this one, we can number all the factors of 24. So let's put that down. Factors of 24 is equal to, let's do them in pairs. 1, 24. Then we have 2, 12. Then we have 3, 8. Then we have 4 and 6. So these are all of our factors. Now we have to add them all together. And just for presentation's sake, let's put them in order. We have 1, 2, plus 3, plus 4, plus 6, plus 8, plus 12, plus 24. And when you add all of these together, you get 60 as your sum. That's it, simply adding together all the factors of 24. So here we are writing down prime factors of 66. So now let's begin. We have 66. I'm going to be making a factor tree. We can see that our factors at first are 6 and 11. Now, have we found a prime number? Yes, we have. I'm going to circle that one. However, 6 is not a prime number. We're going to do 3 and 2. And when I find a prime factor, I circle them like this. So we have the prime factors of 66 are just simply 2, 3, and 11, like so. Now, how many factors does 66 have in total? We're not talking about prime factors, we're just talking about normal factors. So again, let's write them in pairs. We have 166. We have 233. We have not 4, 5, 6, 11. And we miss 1, we have 3 and 22. Whoops, you can tell that number is 22. So let's write them in order, and then we use the text over here. We have 1, 2, 3, 11, 22, 33, and 66. Those are all of our factors. How many do they have in total? Has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, we actually have to put in 6 and 11, and then we actually have 8 factors. So how many factors does it have in total? We have 8. So another key word to be careful of is ascending. What does ascending mean? It means going from smallest to biggest. It gets bigger. I, just for ease, always put them in pairs just to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. So let's start by doing this. 148, 224, 316. 4. If you can do them without pairs, that's great, but just to make sure you've got every single one. 4 times 12, and then 6 times 8. So that means we are left with our factors, but we're not finished. We have to put them in ascending order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and then we have 4 times 12, we have 3 times 16, we have 2 times 24, and then we also have 1 times 48. So that is our full list of factors. Okay, what is the largest number that is a factor of both 48 and 64? Let's start drawing a factor table. And let's start off each time divided by 2, just so we have a common factor to deal with, because largest number is basically asking for the HCF. Now, what does that mean if you can envision your factor Venn diagrams? So the HCF is everything in this middle bit. So the factors that are common, we are going to multiply it together. So to do this, we're going to have 64 and 48. Now each time we're going to divide by 2, which gives us 32 and 24. We can divide that by 2 again, and we can get 16 and 12. We can divide that by 2 again. Remember, these are all the factors, this 2 and 2, are the factors that we are getting in common, so they're going to be very important later. We get 8 and 6. We then divide by 2 again. We get 4, 3. Now, can we have any common factors between it? No, we can't. Now, our HCF is all the factors that were common, so 2, 2, 2, 2, and 2. So let's note that down here. HCF is equal to, how many 2's you have? 4. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is equal to 16. So our highest factor, or largest factor, that is common in both 48 and 64 is in fact 16.
Now, this one, by trial and erroring, you would see that. Let's try out the 27. Now, 3 less than a multiple of 5. Most multiples of 5 end in 5 or 0. So it could be 3 less would mean 2 or 7. Most of them end in 2 or 7. 3 more than a multiple of 6, that one gets more possibilities. So this one would just be a trial and error. So let's try 27. You would have 6 by 6 times 4 plus 3, which gives us 24 plus 3, which is equal to 27. And then we've satisfied this condition, 3 more than a multiple of 6. Now we have to do the other condition, which is 5 times 6 minus 3. So that's 30 minus 3, which is equal to 27. So 27 is the only one that satisfies both the conditions. So what is the smallest 4-digit positive whole number which has 4 different digits? Now, to do these, we know that our smallest digits are 0, 1, 2, 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. However, Is 0, 1, 2, 3 a 4-digit number? No, because if we have 0 at the beginning, that gives us a 3-digit number, 123. So how do I do this? We quickly just swap around. The smallest would still be 1, 0, 2, 3. 1023 is our smallest digit number. So how do I find the largest number less than 100, which is a multiple 2, 3, and also 5? Now this is giving us a clue because we know that our lowest common multiple has to be something that can be divisible by 2, can be divisible by 3, and also divisible by 5, which means that this has to be 2 times 3 is 6, 6 times 5 is 30. We have to have a multiple, 30 has to be a factor of this number. However, let's see, it has to be less than 100, highlight the important bit. So now that we've found the multiples it can be, let's write them down. We do 30. I think we can go higher. Can we go higher than that? Yes, we can. Can we go higher than that? 120. This would not be a valid answer because then this is higher than 100. So what is our largest number? It is 90. So my age is a multiple of 7. Next year it will be a multiple of 5. I am more than 20 years old, less than 80. So this gives us some parameters to work with. Multiple of 7, but next year will be multiple of 5. This is important because we generally know what multiples of 5s look like. So if next year is a multiple of 1, multiple of 5, that means plus 1, it would have to equal to either 0 or 5. For example, 35. This year will have to be 34. So that means our multiples of 7 have to end in 4 or 9. Let's write this down. Multiples of 7 end in 4 or 9. So that next year they can be a multiple of 5. Oh, that's just gone. So multiples of 7 end in 4 or 9. Cool. So what multiples of 7 can I think of between 20 and 80 that end in 4 or 9? I can think of 49, which kind of puts us in a good place. We have 7 times 7, which is equal to 49. Now, what about next year? Next year it will be multiple of 5. Now, add 1 to 49, we get 50. Is that a multiple of 5? Yes, it is. I am more than 20 years old, but less than 80. Do I fit the parameters? Yes, I do. Therefore, how old am I? This is now, not next year, now. I am 49 years old. So for question number 21, what number between 400 and 500 divides exactly by 2, 3, and 11? This is sort of similar to the other question where we write down the LCM. So the LCM, because the LCM has to be a combination of 2 times 3 times 11, because that's what they tell us. You can't have the number without 2 times 3 times 11 going into it. What does this mean? This is 66, so now we have to find the highest multiple of 66 between 400 and 500. Well, not highest multiple, just one that would help us. So to do this real quick, let's do 500 divided by 66, just to see how far we can go. 500 divided by 66. This is equal to around 7.57. So this means we haven't got enough space to be quite 8. It's in the middle. So the highest number we can get is 66 times 7, because we can't go past 7, otherwise we get over 500. And then that will give us 462 as our answer.
Does 462, we know it for a fact has 2, 3, and 11 as factors because we've only chosen multiples of all of them combined, 66. So our thing is 462, our answer. So for question 22, we actually have what is the smallest positive number that can be divided exactly by all these numbers without a remainder. Now, the way we can do this is that smallest positive number is the same thing as saying lowest common multiple. And so in order to make sure we're not getting a number that's too big, we need to find out the common factors of 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8, or the highest common factor, and then we can multiply them all together to get the lowest common multiple. So we are going to do the same thing and take out our factors. Let's draw a little table. We have 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8. First thing we're going to do is take out 2. This becomes 1. These stay the same. We have 2, we have 3, and we have 4. Can we take out 2 again? Because remember, the highest common factor here we're trying to find the LCM is what's common. So this is going to be the middle of our factor Venn diagram. So when we take out 2, this is left the same. This is left the same. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Left the same. And then we have 2. What can we take out again? We can take out 2 again. This is same, 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 and then we can take out the 1. What can we take out this time? 3. So we're left with this the same. 1, 3 divided by 3 is 1. Whoops. We have that. Then another 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And then we have 1. So what have been our common factors? In order to find the lowest common multiple, we are going to multiply all of these, because in order to be a multiple of all of these, we have to find to its core these factors. So let's multiply them together. We have, in fact, let's write it down. We have 2 times 2 times 2 times 3, which you'll see is 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24. Now let's check our answer. If that was confusing, let's check just purely if you want to try and error it. So 24, is that divisible by 2? Yes. Is it divisible by 3? Yes. 4? Yes. 6? Yes. 8? Yes. So it can't be something like 16, because then it wouldn't be divisible by 3, for example, or 6. So 24, using this method, is the smallest positive number that can be divided exactly by all of those. This is the verbal reasoning section of the booklet, and we're starting off with question number 23. Which of these pairs of words has a different relationship? Let's try and analyze the relationship here. So calm and peaceful, fast and quick, angry and happy, sad, melancholy, tall and high. Now the thing that's reaching out to me is that these are synonyms. Fast and quick are synonyms, angry and happy not synonyms, sad and melancholy synonyms, and tall and high synonyms. The only one that doesn't is not a synonym is angry and happy. They are in fact antonyms. Question number 24 is, which is the one that's odd one out? Screamed, typed. So they're all doing something with an adverb. However, typed quietly is the only one that isn't physically saying something. So speak, do that with your mouth. Shouted, mouth. Whispered, mouth. Whispered, mouth. Typed quietly is the only one which you don't do with your mouth. You can't say it physically. You have to type it with your fingers. 25, she worked diligently on her adventurous project until completion. Diligently is very much a adverb. The only one that's an adjective is adventurous project. So the adventurous is describing the noun project. So the answer will be E. So we have a clue that helps us here with question number 26, is that 5 is the only letter that starts one word but ends the others. So we have 5 at the end, 5 at the end, so that has to correspond to S. And then that same 5 at the beginning, which has to be the S at the beginning, which is start. So we know 5 is equal to S. Now make sure you write down everything. Those look pretty similar, but that's 5 is equal to S. So we know that art has to end in an S, and the only ones that end in an S here, we can cross out A, C, and we can also cross out E. So if we know this word is star, we know we have to have a 9, so 9 is equal to T. Therefore, we know that the end has to go 9, 5. Therefore, the only one that can be the answer is B. So we don't have to figure out all the letters, we just have to do elimination. 26B. So for question 27, I always like to draw out the spaces. We have 5, which should hopefully come up soon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we have Jacob is the lowest with 60. Megan is the highest with 64. Let's put those scores in. 60 and then that's 64. Then we know that Emily scored higher than someone but lower than the other. So then she has to be in the middle. And then scored higher than Katie but then lower than Liam. Therefore, let's finish the rest of the scores. We just need to know what scores Emily did, and since they're consecutive, we just put them in like that. So, how many points did Emily score? She got 62. B is the right answer. I think you can do question 28 just by looking, but just for confirmation, let's actually count the number of letters. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Mountains is 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we are doing it in descending order of length. That's another thing to notice. It goes from most to least. So actually, we know the most, mountains is definitely the most. We know that the smallest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These have the same. Let's just do hikers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we know it has to end with climb and every. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, since it ends with climb and every, cross out E, cross out D, cross out C, we are left with A and B. However, we can clearly see that A is the only option where the whole rest of the sentence is in order. Mountains, weekend, then hikers, then climb, then every. So after you've confirmed an answer, make sure the rest of it makes sense as well. So 28 is A. Let's order the vowels. For 29, it's descend.
Option C. May has a vowel length proportion of 33%, March 20%, January 42.8%, November 37.5%. No 2 months share exactly the same percentage, so the correct statement is none are the same. Option C.
Here we're doing a similar thing, but pay attention to final letter, if they have the same final letter arranged in the order in which they appear in the sentence. And we're doing alphabetical order, so not vowels or anything. So we know Y has to be at the very end because Y is all the way at the end of the alphabet. So let's cross out E and A. And given that, so O, L, E, we've dealt with the drawer. We know that E has to be at the very beginning because that is the earliest in the alphabet. So the answer is D. So for this one, we're going to stay on the highlighter because we're doing number of syllables. This is 31. And descending order, so most to least. So how many syllables? Creative, children, create, wonderful, and dreams. So we have it pretty cut out for us. We need 3, 3, 2, 2, and then 1. We end with dreams. So let's cross out B. Let's cross out, oops, not C, actually. Sorry. We have cross out D. And then we're left with A, C, and E. We have to start with creative, wonderful. It has to be creative, wonderful. So cross out C and E. We are left with A as the final answer for 31. Homophones. What does homophones mean? Homophones means words that sounds the same. Homo means same, phone means sound. So sight, 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 and might. Pretty much all of these are the same. So definitely not C. Sight, sight, and sight only. B has to be correct. And that is the VR section. So this is NVR. We're starting with question 3, and it's a coding system. And we're going to try and find out which words correspond to what. So we're going to start with top letter. Now what's being shared here in 1 and 3, I can see a same orientation. So this is sort of a T. Let's do this in a different color. So T shape, do you guys see that? It's like a horizontal with a vertical. So this T shape, if it's facing the right, this little tail, just like a 1 and 3, we have an E shared, therefore E means the orientation of which way the T is going. So which one matches 4? H matches 2. They're both going to the left. So we need to have H at the top. So we're going to cross out A and B. Now what should be at the bottom? What determines the shading of the shape? We have G and G. So we both know that the similarity shared here is probably G means white. Let's write that down here. G means white. So what means grey? We have F, a similarity. So the answer has to be HF. Question 34. We have a shared similarity between 1 and 2. We are looking at the bottom one being R. And that corresponds to the shape being white. We can see that that's the only similarity they have, not these dashed lines. So that's white. Over here, I'll write that down. R equals white. So we have a different pattern that we haven't seen before. So as of now, we know it definitely can't be this one, because otherwise it would be grey inside. So it has to be something that's different. I'm not convinced by this cue, but let's just continue to see what else we find. We see that we have these dashes here. Don't know if you can see that. We have a similarity here. So what's the only shared thing here? We have S at the top. So if we have one dash, then we need to have S at the top as well over here. So our thing has to be any of these but S at the top. Which is the only one with S at the top? We have A. So 34 is A. 35, what similarities? A, 1 and 2 are similar. They both are triangles. So bottom shape corresponds to, P is equal to shape. So if P is equal to shape and we have a circle here, that means we need to have an S at the bottom. A and C are then crossed out. What corresponds to the shading? R and R are similar, therefore the shape has to be white if it's R. So what means grey? T is equal to grey. What's the only one that corresponds? We have 35. D is the correct option. So this one's a little bit different, and we'll see why. We have the code, but we see that none of them are similar. So let's try and figure out the things that it can't be. So what's similar here? M is to do with semicircle. Let's type that down, semicircle. There we go. So if M is to do a semicircle, it definitely can't be A. We know that none of these bottom shapes either has to be one of the P's. And if it corresponds to none of these arrow shapes, let's assume that this top letter is to do with the arrow shape, then if none of them match, then it has to be something completely different. Therefore, D, OP is correct. Question 37, the answer, this question is repeated, so we can just go ahead and put that down as D. For 38, try not to be intimidated by a bunch of shapes with, we just know that it's a prism. And how do I know that? We can see that all of these shapes are prism. And I know that these, oh, let's do it in a different color actually. Let's highlight it. We have, so this is going to form half of the prism, and this is going to solve half of the prism as well. What does this shape look like? You'll see that when it folds up, you will have something that looks a bit like this. Notice there is no hollow bit over here like in shape B. It's a clear thing, so C has to be the answer. For 39, we can see that, so it helps knowing what angle you're looking at. So let's say this is kind of giving it to me, we're looking at it from here. So when this folds up to here, because this will fold up here, we can see that this line will continue and they'll join. It's going midway. So these have pretty much got that idea. It's only C that does not have a continuous line. Now let me cross that out just so we don't have loads of markings, we don't get confused. But we've already crossed out one cube. Now, what's going to happen if this goes up, this goes up? Let's put them in like that. This is going to fold over to go at the top, and this is also going to fold over to go at the top, and these will eventually meet at the top. Now, when do we see that? This A does not have a circle at the top. B does not have a circle at the top. The only ones where the line is continuous in the middle, and these will fold into each other. I wish you could see my hands right now, but if they both go up, then they will connect and they'll ultimately form this little dot over there. So let's do that in red because D is the answer. Whoops. There we go. 40, we have these shapes and we need to find an aerial view. I straight away know that C is not the correct answer because it does not have a circle bit. And you need to pay attention because A is the only one where they go sort of in a diagonal. This is going in a diagonal. There's not like this one. There's not a random thing over here and like a long block like B. The only one that's going in the same diagonal as this big shape is A. We don't even have to look at D and B. So 40 is A. So over in 41, x-axis, what does that mean? We have sort of a line going across like that. That forms our line of symmetry. So this whole shape, imagine it's a piece of paper. You're going to flip that piece of paper this way. So just take your hand, whack it the other way. The first thing that's going to tell us the right orientation, let's pay attention to these arrows. When they flip round, they're going to come round here. Remember, if it's at the furthest end here, it's going to go all the way to the bottom over there. And they're going to meet like that. Do we agree? Which are the only ones that look like that? We have C. Now pay attention because the arrows are going the wrong way. C and B are out. Now, what differentiates A and D? We're going to be focusing on this row over here. Now, let's just undo that. I just wanted you to see what I was doing. But if we focus on this row here and we mirror it across this x-axis, this arrow here will meet the exact same thing like that, right? So if we're between A and D, if we focus on this arrow, we see that D has the arrow going down, where it in fact should be going up to meet that vertical reflection. Okay, so A should be the answer. I think straight away for D, for 42, we can cross that out because we can see that this will absolutely not look like a quadrant. And the only thing that's catching, I think A is pretty much too normal looking. We have a segment taken out here, segment there. Now, what's the difference between C and B? They've both got these squares in the top right corner. However, we can see that B, this little hollow shape goes along the side of the shape, right? It's a rectangle that's standing up. C is horizontal. However, if it was horizontal like C, the cutout would look like this, not like B. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Let me just move up so you can see. B is correct.
So moving on to section C. Once you've read the passage, unfortunately there is a bit of a hint here, so this is sort of giving you an idea of what the passage is about. If you look at question 43, it says this passage is written in which one of these tenses, or which one of these, not tenses, but which one of the following. It does say up here that it's third person, but if you are just looking at which one of these are, what is characterized by each of these. So first person is when you say I, second person is when the narrator says like you and is speaking directly at you. Third person is like he or she did something, and you've got a very clear option here that says he did something, okay? So again, if it's had, then that's not going to be present, and it's not going to be future either. That's past tense, so it's third person. Question 44. Overall, the boy's emotional state between lines 1 to 9 is best described as what? So 1 to 9 is right here. And if you look at different sort of, if you look at the evidence here, you have to look for things that will tell you how he is feeling. So if we look at line 1, he's climbing in silence. In line 7, he's walking slowly. And in line 9, he didn't turn back. Okay. First of all, climbing in silence is already a bit of less of a... It's not like a joyful or cheerful state, okay? And not especially confused or annoyed, okay? There's no evidence of either of these. If he's holding his breath, climbing in silence, there's a bit of sort of not fear, but there's definitely a bit something tense going on, okay? So if we continue looking at again the different evidence pieces here, he's walking slowly. He doesn't turn back, okay? So overall, there's a bit of, it's definitely a tense situation, but he seems quite determined because he's not turning back. So you're going to get the option here. He is quietly determined, okay? Question 45. Lines 3 and 14, what can we infer? We have to read the options here first. So he's lost, he's approaching a halfway point, he's familiar with the mountain's layout, he is searching, or he is planning. So if we look at line 14 here, beyond him, he knew the valley opened. So he knew the layout, that the valley was going to open up. So he is familiar with the mountain's layout. Question 46. The phrase light leaked from the sky like ink suggests what? So if light is leaking out of the sky like ink, there's definitely sun, okay? So is it going to be early morning and cloudy? Is there a sudden downpour? It's not going to be raining. That's not what it's saying. Dawn is breaking with golden light. The boy has poor eyesight. So if we look at this is from line 5. So, light leaked it like ink from a cracked bottle, slow and final. Okay, now this is the evidence. Obviously, it's asking you particularly about this section, but also line 5 as a whole. Okay, so this is evidence. If it's final, is it going to be dawn or is it going to be sunset? It's very clearly going to be sunset. So it's not going to be early morning or dawn or any of these. It's going to be sunset. Okay, so the other A and D are distractors. Alright. Question 47, line 11 is to make the reader do what? So, feel like the mountain is humming, etc., etc. So if we read line 11, the silence felt not empty but thick, like a thing pressed against his ears. Now if you read the context, the higher he climbed, the more the sound dropped away, and the hawk circled once and then vanished like an afterthought. So it's definitely again a tense situation here. Is it there to feel like the mountain is humming? Well, it's not. It's silent, right? But it's saying it's felt thick. So the mountain isn't necessarily humming. Hear a bird song? It's not. That's not what it says. Laugh at the contrast. Nothing to do with humour here. I think the boy is deaf again. Nothing to do with that. So imagine physical pressure from the quiet. That's sort of what it is getting at here. It's very vague, but that's basically what it's saying here, right? The silence felt not empty, but thick. Okay, so the silence is... You might wonder how can silence have like a feeling? Obviously, this is a way to... It's setting the atmosphere, okay? It's very tense, and it's not necessarily that you can feel pressure from silence, but that's probably what the person felt like. He felt like there is pressure coming from how silent and tense everything is. Okay, so option B. Question 48. So a rusted tooth is an example of what? So you have to look at the whole thing. He paused whereon iron post jutted from like a rusted tooth. Like is always a simile. Okay. Question 49. Which detail least contributes to a sense of isolation? So we can just read these. Isolation means loneliness and separation and all alone. So cloud blanket, if we look at line 9, the world was tucked below a cloud blanket. So again, this is isolating because everything else is way far below. So that is not going to be the answer. Line 10, there is no birds, no rustle. That is obviously isolating, there's no sounds. Stood ahead, so look at line 19. A single pine stood ahead, its branch rattling. So again, it's a single pine, it's very alone. It's adding to this atmosphere of everything being isolated. Okay, so that's going to help as well. And alone and watchful is obviously isolation, so you're left with option C, which is if you look at line 15... He paused where an old iron post jutted from the rock like a rusted tooth, not necessarily adding to the atmosphere of isolation, but maybe adding to the atmosphere of danger. Okay. So, question 50. The word jutted most nearly means. So, jutted just means stuck out. Again, you should be able to tell that from the context as well if it's coming out. This iron rod is coming out of the ground. Question 51. Which description creates a stronger sense of danger? So definitely climbing in silence is adding a bit of danger. I wouldn't say that light leaking like ink is adding danger. The hawk vanished, it's adding a bit. This is more of isolation as we discussed. So if we look at option C, which is line 21, the light caught a high seam of ice, made it gleam like a knife. Okay, now a knife is a very dangerous weapon, and the ice, if it seems like a knife, it's more than likely adding to this sense of danger. Okay, very much adding to the sense of danger. So yes, C is going to have the strongest connotation of danger. Question 52. So mark two answers. Why does the author most likely use figurative language in lines 5 and 21. So if we look at lines 5 and 21, this is figurative language, where it's saying it looks like a knife. And number 5, again, it's figurative, where he's saying the sky is like an ink from cracked bottle. So figurative language is when it's not literally saying something. The sky isn't actually a bottle, right? The light isn't a bottle, but it seems like that. And it always allows you to imagine it, imagine the scenario better. So what we've got here is, why is he doing that? Not to create a peaceful tone. Definitely to add a visual and emotional impact. It allows you to visualize it better. And no, it's not providing comic relief. This means humor, making it funny. It's not doing that. And it's not saying he's hallucinating. So it's to help them picture the sky and the ice. Again, visualizing it. Okay. Question 53. What does post and red fabric in lines 15 and 16 suggest? Once again, we have to go back up here. So tied to it was a strip of red fabric, faded to a ghost of warning. So it's definitely a warning sign, right? It seems like there's a piece of fabric tied to that old iron post. So what we're going to be left with, it's definitely, I would say, boundary or a warning, because it does mention that. And that someone has been injured there before. There's no evidence for that. That it was a cheerful hiking trail, definitely not from the context. And the boy has been there before, again, no real evidence for that. So path is marked for safety. So now let's have a look if there is any evidence for that. If we go to line 15, so there's an iron post jutting from the rock, tied to it was a strip of red fabric, faded to a ghost of warning. The wind lifted it briefly. He stepped past it. Ground narrowed. Single. Okay. All right. So we're left with it's a bit vague here, but we have those two options. There's no real evidence that the boy's been here before. See, doesn't seem to say that he was the one that put that fabric on the post, but there was definitely someone that did. Okay, and if you imagine, why would someone put that piece of cloth there? Potentially to mark for safety, to mark that this is the path to go down if you're following this trail. Okay, and as we know, we are walking through a mountain pass during the winter night. Winter twilight. So it's a path. There's a iron post with a red flag on it. You can more than likely assume this is where you should be walking through it. And it also, again, evidence is showing that the path is narrowing. The path is still there. Okay, so the post is on the path. So it's again marking the path. Okay, so that's why B is going to be the most accurate here. The path is marked as safety. It's also a boundary or a warning in terms of the outside of the path. Okay. Question 54. What overall impression is created by the mounting setting? So two options again. It's definitely cold. You can see that from all of the different adjectives around here. And lonely. We were talking about isolation as well earlier right here. So we're going to go with these two options as the best answers there.